Ever wonder how genetics and discrimination are related? Now, before we get into it, let's look at the bigger picture. The human body functions through the use of organ systems. These systems are made up of various different organs. Organs are really just many types of specialized tissues working together. In turn, these tissues are made up of tiny specialized and unspecialized cells that hold the complex genetic info that makes a person who they are. The cell is the smallest thing that retains the properties of life. It's amazing how something so small can determine how your life will be lived. Our cells hold instructions that allow our bodies to function. These instructions are found in the control center of a cell, the nucleus. Here in the nucleus, we can find the DNA. These are long spaghetti-like threads of genetic material that contain genetic instructions. Once our DNA is bundled up, it forms what is called a chromosome. Each chromosome contains a number of different characteristic determining units called genes. All the genes make up the human genome. It was not too long ago that we learned through the Human Genome Project how our genes are sequenced and actually make up who we are as individuals. The Genome Project allowed us to learn that our DNA is built with long paired strands that only carry 4 letters, A, T, G, C, short for adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. We should know that A always pairs with T and G always pairs with C. Kind of like how Chuck and Blair or Hannah and Caleb are always together. They can't be paired with anyone else because they bond only with one another. Anyways, back on topic. These pairings come together to form a double helix, which are base pairs consisting of combinations of these letters. When the long 3 sequence of 3 billion base pairs of ACGTs are read, they tell our bodies how to build proteins that are able to do anything and everything. Seriously, proteins do everything. They determine skin color, eye color, hair color, fingerprints, and basically everything else. And if just one letter happens to be incorrect in the sequence of 3 billion base pairs, this can alter the production process of proteins and can directly or indirectly lead to outer characteristics that can easily distinguish you from others. Now that we know how crucial our genes are when making up every one of us individually, we can get back to our main question. How is science and discrimination related at all? Well, like we said, our genes help determine our physical appearance, our strengths and weaknesses, and even our personalities. What happens when you're noticeably different from the rest of the people around you? Looking back at our human history, you can see that many conflicts between people were caused by discrimination. If people looked physically different and thought differently, it would lead to hatred between people. Think about genocides. What is a genocide? Well, genocide is the deliberate and systematic extermination of a racial group. When you break that word up, you'll get geno and side. Geno sounds oddly similar to genes, right? Coincidence? I think not. An example of this happened about 70 years ago during World War II. Nazis discriminated Jewish people and other minorities because they weren't a part of the so-called Aryan race, which were believed to be German, blue-eyed, blonde-hair, fair-skinned people. Basically, if your genetics didn't permit for these phenotypical traits to exist, you were deemed undesirable and were disposed of just because of your genetic buildup. That's not the only example of discrimination due to genes either. An ongoing problem that has existed for many years is the discrimination of people due to skin color. Skin color is determined from the amount of melanin your body produces. Therefore, if you have darker skin, your body probably produces more melanin than people with a lighter skin tone. Your body will know to produce more melanin based on the instructions that your genome sequence gives. Really, you have no control over what skin color you have, as it's simply a part of your genes that you inherit from parents, just as you inherit other physical traits. Your appearance is purely determined on your genes. Just because you look different doesn't mean you're more or less human than others. Now, we've all heard of this type of discrimination before, but have you ever thought about how people with disabilities are discriminated against? Disabilities usually come about when there is an error in our genes. Perhaps our genes were misinterpreted when making proteins and it caused us to have an abnormality. For example, people with Down syndrome have 1 extra chromosome. This extra chromosome causes an error in the genome sequence. Therefore, proteins will be made incorrectly. This is something no one has control over. Individuals that have disabilities are often brushed aside because they lack capabilities. Oftentimes, they find it hard to acquire jobs and education, among other things, simply because they don't have the same genetic buildup as others. It's interesting to see how humans tend to discriminate their own species simply because of the wide variety of differences physically caused by our uncontrollable, unchangeable genes. In reality, no one should be able to tell anyone they're more or less of a person simply because their DNA is different. After all, we're all still human. If we were to all sequence our own genome, we would see that no one has perfect genes, and that it is impossible to reach perfection, so we should not judge others based on the way they look, think, or how they act. Each and every one of us has been made differently. We should ensure that genoism, genetic discrimination, never comes to exist. Think before you discriminate others only because they are genetically different.
Thanks for watching! This amazing video was brought to you by ACD Productions!